What they've said is that they're conducting an offensive in Dar el-Balah, which is in the sort of centre-south of Gaza Strip. And there are clashes now to the south and east of Dar el-Balah. So they're moving into that area, and they've told people to move out. Those people are now moving to the west, and they're moving further down into Khan Yunis. But again, if you look at the areas that Israel says are now effectively a war zone, it's about 80% of the whole territory of Gaza. And it leaves, again, the Gazans either staying in the war zone, with all that that implies, or moving to the coast, particularly to Al-Mawasi down in the southwest, which is where these aid points are. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's 3 aid points out of the 4 are in that area. I mean, what are the Israelis trying to do? Militarily, it makes no sense at all. I mean, by and large, in other parts of Gaza, they're bombing the rubble. In this particular area of, in this part of Gaza, they haven't conducted so many operations. So they're moving into an area now that has been left relatively untouched until now. They say that they think that some of the Israeli hostages will be there, but I mean, by the time they're moving, they won't be there. That's the whole point. Because at least 40% of the tunnel network that the Hamas had is still sufficiently intact for Hamas people to move around, and the hostages almost certainly will be moved. And again, the idea that military operations free the hostages is not borne out by the facts, because 130-odd hostages have been released in the 2 periods of negotiation, and 5 hostages have been rescued by military action. It would have been 8, except that the IDF killed 3 of them by mistake as they were emerging. So the numbers are very small compared to those who are released through negotiation. Now, the Israelis do say that putting military pressure on Hamas increases the chance of a negotiation. But again, there's not a lot of evidence for that either. So this process looks as if, to be honest, it's a process of trying to drive the Gazan population to a strip on the coast. And what will happen to the rest of Gaza, who knows? Elements in the Israeli government say, well, we'll retake the Gaza Strip, we'll recolonise it again. Netanyahu isn't exactly saying that, but it's not clear what he thinks, because they don't seem to have a plan they're prepared to share with the rest of the world for what happens next.
At the same time, the Israeli government and its military is focusing on the Houthis once more in Yemen.
Yes, an attack on Hodeidah, the port, on port facilities. And what Israel Katz, the defence minister, said is that we're stopping the Houthis building up these facilities again because they're receiving arms from Iran. And that does seem to be true. Last Wednesday, about 750 tonnes of military supplies was intercepted, mainly on Arab dhows, these hundreds of local fishing boats that go backwards and forwards. And it was 750 tonnes of stuff, which US CENTCOM confirmed. They were actually seized by the ex-government of Yemen, and they said, and they put all this stuff on display, and CENTCOM looked at it and said, yeah, it's serious stuff. So it was components for missiles, it was some anti-ship missile material, some ammunition. Clearly, Iran is still supplying or trying to supply the Houthis. And so, although this Israeli attack wasn't in direct response to anything that happened in the last 24 hours, it seems to have been a response to the siege of these arms last Wednesday, and a sort of warning to the Houthis from Israel that we still know you're doing this. You're still targeting Israel with drones and missiles, and we're going to keep hitting you while you do.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at some of today's